You're exhausted, aren't you? Maybe you can't even pinpoint exactly why, but you feel it deep in your bones. You feel like you're constantly walking on eggshells, following invisible rules that everyone else seems to know but no one ever explicitly taught you. Always be polite, never make waves, follow the proper procedures, wait your turn, be patient, respect authority, play fair. You learned early that following the rules was the right thing to do, that if you worked hard and did everything by the book, success would eventually come, that if you were honest, respectful, and played by society's rules, you'd be rewarded for your integrity, that the system was designed to recognize and promote those who colored inside the lines. But what if I told you that all of this is a lie? A comfortable illusion designed to keep you predictable, manageable, and competing in a game where the real players aren't even following the same rule book. How many opportunities have you missed because you were waiting for permission? How many times have you watched less qualified people get promoted because they understood something about navigating systems that you were never taught? How many times have you followed protocol perfectly while others bent the rules and got ahead? Listen carefully. The world doesn't reward rule followers. The world rewards those who understand when to follow rules and when to strategically ignore them. If you're here, it's because you've already felt this frustration. You've been playing the game honestly while watching others win through methods that seemed unfair, unethical, or simply outside the boundaries you thought everyone had to respect. The more rigidly you follow rules, the more predictable you become. The more predictable you are, the easier you are to manipulate and control. The more others can count on your compliance, the less they need to consider your interests. And that's where Niccolo Machiavelli comes in. Machiavelli wasn't the villain that popular culture makes him out to be. He was perhaps the first person to write honestly about how power actually works, as opposed to how we're told it should work. He understood something that most people refuse to accept, that rigid rule following in a world where others play strategically is a guaranteed path to being outmaneuvered. In this video, we're going to explore why you need to stop playing by rules that others are already breaking. This doesn't mean becoming dishonest or cruel. It means waking up to the reality that while you've been following the script, others have been writing their own. We'll examine the uncomfortable truth that the very rules you've been taught to respect might be the chains keeping you from achieving what you're capable of. Also, please like and subscribe to help these ideas reach people who need them most. Thank you for spreading wisdom. And if you're tired of watching less principled people get ahead while you remain stuck in place, maybe it's time to learn what Machiavelli understood about the difference between being moral and being effective. Ready? Then let's begin. The illusion of fair play. Do you still believe that life operates like a well-refereed game where everyone follows the same rules? Look around you. Who gets promoted fastest in your workplace? Who builds successful businesses? Who gains influence and respect? Are they always the most honest, the most by the book, the most rule-abiding people? Or are they the ones who understand how to navigate systems strategically? The truth is uncomfortable. The world isn't governed by fairness, but by effectiveness. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago when he wrote The Prince. He wasn't teaching people to be evil. He was revealing how power actually operates in the real world, not in the idealized version we're taught to believe in. One of his most important insights is this: those who succeed understand that rules are tools, not absolutes. They know when following rules serves their interests and when rigid adherence becomes self-sabotage. They understand that every system has official rules and unofficial realities. You can spend years being the perfect employee, following every policy, never questioning procedures, always going through proper channels. You can dot every I and cross every T. But the day budget cuts come, or when someone needs to be promoted, your rule following won't protect you if you haven't also built relationships, demonstrated value, or positioned yourself strategically. The harsh reality is that systems don't reward compliance, they reward results. And results often require understanding not just what the rules say, but how the game actually gets played by those who win. Have you noticed that rule followers are often the ones asking for permission, explaining themselves, justifying their actions? Meanwhile, those who understand strategic thinking are the ones setting agendas, making decisions, and creating the very rules that others feel compelled to follow. Why does this happen? Because rigid rule following is often interpreted as a lack of initiative or strategic thinking. It signals that you need external structure to function rather than internal wisdom to navigate complexity. Machiavelli observed that a leader must understand both the official requirements of their role and the unofficial realities of how things actually get done. He said that those who govern must know both the nature of laws and the nature of power, because systems rarely operate exactly as they're designed to on paper. This applies to you too. If you continue believing that following rules is always enough, you'll continue to be surprised when rule benders outmaneuver you. Not because they're necessarily smarter or better, but because they understand something about how systems really work that you haven't been willing to see. It's time to understand where this blind faith in rules comes from and why it might be limiting your potential in ways you haven't even considered. The psychology of rule following. You weren't born needing everyone's approval to take action. You weren't born believing that you needed permission to pursue opportunities or that waiting for official authorization was always the virtuous path. These patterns were taught to you, and more importantly, they were conditioned into you. From childhood, you learned that compliance brought safety. Follow the rules and you won't get in trouble. Wait your turn and you'll eventually be recognized. Be patient and good things will come to those who wait. Don't rock the boat. Respect your elders and authorities. And gradually, you internalize the belief that rule following was not just safer, but morally superior. But what nobody told you is that this creates a psychological trap. You become so focused on external validation and approval that you lose touch with your own strategic thinking and intuitive wisdom. You start believing that if something isn't explicitly permitted, it's probably not allowed. If there isn't a clear precedent, you shouldn't try it. The problem is that this rule-following mentality was designed for children who need structure and guidance. It was never meant to be a permanent way of operating as an adult in competitive, complex environments where creative thinking and strategic action are rewarded. Today, you might find yourself paralyzed by the need for permission. You feel guilty about networking strategically because it feels like you're using people. You hesitate to negotiate aggressively because it seems unfair to the other party. You avoid taking credit for your ideas because it feels immodest. You wait for others to notice your contributions instead of advocating for yourself because self-promotion feels wrong. But here's a reality check. This isn't virtue. This is fear. Fear of standing out. Fear of being seen as difficult or demanding. Fear of taking responsibility for your own success instead of waiting for others to recognize your worthiness. This fear has turned you into someone who sabotages their own potential. You call it humility, but it's often just fear of appearing ambitious. You call it patience, but it's frequently fear of taking initiative. You call it respect for process, but it's usually fear of taking responsibility for results. Your rule following isn't necessarily kindness. It's often an unconscious strategy to avoid the discomfort of standing out, making waves, or taking risks that might lead to criticism. But this approach has a cost. It keeps you dependent on others for permission, recognition, and opportunity. It makes you reactive rather than proactive. And it ensures that you'll always be playing someone else's game by someone else's rules. There is another way. And to understand it, we need to learn from someone who saw through the comfortable illusions about how power and influence actually work. Machiavellian wisdom. Strategy over compliance. If you're trying to succeed by simply following all the rules and hoping others will notice your compliance, you're setting yourself up for frustration. Machiavelli warned over 500 years ago that this path, while appearing virtuous, is often strategically naive. In The Prince, he writes, "Everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are." This sentence exposes a crucial truth. People don't judge you by your intentions or your internal rule following. They judge you by your impact, your results, and your ability to navigate situations effectively. You might be the most ethical person in your organization, but if you appear ineffective or easy to overlook, that's how you'll be treated. You might follow every procedure perfectly, but if you don't understand how to position your contributions strategically, they'll be taken for granted. This is why Machiavelli emphasized that effective people must understand both the official systems and the unofficial realities. They must know how to work within structures when it serves their goals, and how to work around them when rigid compliance would be counterproductive. He writes that a successful person must know how to be both fox and lion, cunning enough to recognize traps and strong enough to deal with threats. This isn't about being deceptive or aggressive. It's about having the strategic awareness to understand when different approaches are needed. The fox represents strategic thinking, understanding how systems really work, recognizing hidden agendas, seeing through appearances to understand what's really happening. The lion represents executive presence, the ability to command respect, set boundaries, and take decisive action when needed. Most rule followers develop neither of these capabilities. They assume systems work as advertised and that their compliance will speak for itself. They don't develop the fox's strategic awareness because they believe official rules tell the whole story. They don't develop the lion's commanding presence because they've been taught that assertiveness is somehow wrong. Machiavelli observed, "Since it is difficult to unite them in one person, it is much safer to be feared than loved, when, of the two, either must be dispensed with." This doesn't mean being cruel or intimidating. It means understanding that respect often comes from demonstrated capability and clear boundaries, not from trying to please everyone. The strategic person understands that sometimes appearing accommodating is useful, and sometimes appearing firm is necessary. They choose their approach based on what the situation requires, not based on rigid rules about how they should always behave. This doesn't mean abandoning your values. It means understanding how to advance your values effectively in the real world, rather than naively assuming that good intentions and rule following are sufficient. The middle path. Strategic without becoming cynical. There's a dangerous misconception that stops many people from thinking strategically. The belief that you only have two choices: be a naive rule follower or become a manipulative rule breaker. This false dichotomy keeps people trapped in ineffective patterns because they fear that any strategic thinking will corrupt their character. This is what philosophers call a false binary. The reality is that there's a middle path, one that allows you to maintain your integrity while also developing the strategic awareness needed to be effective in complex systems. True strategic thinking isn't about abandoning your values. It's about understanding how to advance your values effectively. It's recognizing that good intentions without strategic awareness often lead to good people being marginalized, while less principled actors gain influence. The difference between naive rule following and strategic thinking is this: strategic people understand that rules exist in context. They ask questions like, what is this rule designed to accomplish? When does following this rule serve the intended purpose, and when does it become counterproductive? What are the unofficial norms that actually govern how things get done here? Strategic thinking involves understanding systems rather than just following procedures. It means recognizing that every organization, every relationship, every opportunity has both official rules and unofficial realities. The people who succeed are those who can navigate both. For example, in most workplaces, The official rule is that promotions go to the most qualified candidate. The unofficial reality is often that promotions go to the most visible candidates who have built relationships with decision makers and can articulate their value clearly. The naive rule follower assumes that good work will speak for itself. The strategic person ensures their good work is seen and understood by people who matter. This isn't manipulation, it's communication. It's not rule-breaking, it's understanding how systems actually function versus how they're supposed to function on paper. You can maintain your ethical standards while also developing strategic awareness. You can be honest without being naive. You can respect legitimate authority while also understanding how to influence outcomes. You can be kind without being passive. The key is replacing blind rule following with conscious choice. Instead of automatically complying with every rule or expectation, you evaluate whether that compliance serves your values and goals. Sometimes it will, and you'll choose to follow the rule. Sometimes it won't, and you'll choose a different approach. This requires developing what Machiavelli called virtue, not moral purity, but practical wisdom. The ability to assess situations accurately and respond appropriately, rather than responding the same way regardless of context. Breaking free from the approval trap. Here's the uncomfortable truth about why many people stay trapped in rigid rule following. They're addicted to approval. They've built their sense of self-worth around being seen as good by external authorities, and this need for approval has become more important than their actual effectiveness or fulfillment. If you find yourself constantly seeking permission, avoiding decisions that might be criticized, or waiting for others to recognize your worth, you're operating from an approval-seeking mindset rather than a strategic one. Many people who wake up to their own overcompliance make a dangerous mistake. They think they need to become rebellious, difficult, or confrontational to break free from rule-following patterns. This is just swinging to the opposite extreme, and it's equally ineffective. True liberation happens when you learn to think for yourself. When you stop asking, "What's the rule?" and start asking, "What's the most effective approach?" When you stop seeking approval and start seeking results that align with your values. Here's how to begin this transformation. First, understand that your voice and perspective matter. You've been conditioned to think that questioning established ways of doing things is disrespectful or presumptuous. But intelligent questioning is actually a sign of engagement and strategic thinking. When you see inefficiencies or better ways to accomplish goals, speaking up isn't insubordination, it's leadership. Second, practice making decisions without seeking permission for everything. Start small. If something is within your authority and serves legitimate purposes, do it without asking for approval first. This builds your confidence in your own judgment and reduces your psychological dependence on external validation. Third, learn to negotiate rather than simply accepting initial terms. Whether it's salary, deadlines, responsibilities, or expectations, understand that most things are more flexible than they initially appear. People respect those who can advocate for themselves professionally and reasonably. Fourth, study how successful people actually operate, not just how they say they operate. Watch how they build relationships, position their ideas, handle setbacks, and create opportunities. You'll often find that they're more strategic and less rule-bound than they appear publicly. Fifth, replace the need for approval with commitment to effectiveness. Instead of asking, "Will people think well of me for this?" ask, "Will this approach produce the results I want while maintaining my integrity?" This isn't about becoming ruthless or abandoning ethics. It's about becoming strategic. It's about understanding that good people with good intentions need to be effective if they want to make a positive impact in the world. Your strategic awakening. It's time to be direct with you. How much longer are you going to limit yourself with rules that others are already working around? How much longer will you give away your power to systems and people who see your compliance as convenience rather than virtue? You think following every rule makes you virtuous, but often it just makes you predictable. You think waiting for permission shows respect, but frequently it just shows that you haven't developed the confidence to trust your own judgment. Here's something nobody may have told you directly. The world doesn't owe you recognition for your rule following. Nobody is going to promote you just because you never broke protocol. Nobody is going to give you opportunities simply because you waited patiently in line. Success requires more than compliance. It requires strategic thinking, relationship building, clear communication, and the courage to take appropriate risks. These skills aren't taught in school because educational systems are designed to reward rule following, not strategic thinking. But you can develop these capabilities. You can learn to think strategically while maintaining your integrity. You can become someone who shapes systems rather than just responding to them. You can maintain your values while also understanding how to advance them effectively. The choice is yours. You can continue following rules that keep you small and predictable, always waiting for someone else to recognize your worth and give you permission to succeed. Or you can develop the strategic awareness that allows you to create opportunities, build influence, and achieve goals that matter to you. What would happen if you stopped asking for permission and started taking strategic action? When was the last time you questioned whether a rule or procedure actually served its intended purpose, or whether it had just become bureaucratic habit? I'd be interested to hear in the comments about a time when following the rules held you back, or when you realized that others were succeeding by understanding something about how systems really work that you hadn't grasped. Your experiences might help others recognize their own patterns. And if this perspective on strategic thinking versus blind rule following has shifted how you see your own situation, you might want to explore more insights about developing practical wisdom for navigating complex systems. There's much more to discover about becoming strategically effective while maintaining your integrity. The game is already being played around you. The question isn't whether you should play, it's whether you want to understand the real rules or keep following the ones designed to keep you manageable. Your strategic awakening begins with the recognition that effectiveness and ethics aren't opposites. They're partners in creating the kind of impact you want to have in the world.